Armored Core is a niche within a niche, and a modern version was never going to be for everyone, fans of the classics included, so while it's doing well, it's no surprise a ton of players have bounced off hard. But this is one of those situations where I wonder how many people are missing the forest for the trees. After all, this is one of the few games I'd argue it's not just possible, but easy to play incorrectly and ruin a lot of the fun for yourself in the process. Simply because, just like Sekiro or Elden Ring before, it's a very different kind of game that plays by different rules than people might be used to. And of course, that's not to say it doesn't have problems, it's not a perfect game. But when so much of the criticism is focused on how the game funnels you into specific playstyles and builds, or how the bosses are too oppressive, or how the game has morphed into just another Souls-like, it's hard not to see some of these problems as a lack of perspective. So I've got two messages for everyone today. For the Armored Core fans, trust me, this isn't Dark Souls, we're okay. And to the newer FromSoft fans, this isn't Dark Souls, and that's okay. So, if it isn't Dark Souls, what is Armored Core? Well, you know that part of every mecha anime where two pilots are darting around each other at breakneck speed, lasers and explosions flying everywhere? You know, the best part? Armored Core is almost exclusively that. It's all about embracing that mecha fantasy of explosive speed, power, and precision, about doing your best Gundam impression, slicing up enemies with your beam saber, dashing right into their face and kicking them harder than you ever thought possible. The best part of Armored Core is the fact that it allows you to craft your own experience. I love getting obnoxiously close, running circles around other ACs, so I built into that. But you might prefer being tanky, or spending more time in the air, or even not moving at all. There are tons of ways to play, and they're all viable. Mecha games are all about player expression and build, and Armored Core has some bangers. So why is it such a common sentiment that the game funnels players into specific playstyles? Unfortunately, I think it's kind of Balteus' fault, and to a lesser extent, Mr. Great Filter over here. At this point, it's basically tradition for From Software games. The first boss is going to be a bit of a wall for some players. So, when I heard people were getting filtered a bit harder than normal, I didn't think much of it. I figured, yeah, that makes sense. Balteus would be kind of rough for anyone who's never played an Armored Core game before. Then I found out people were actually talking about the tutorial helicopter, and I had to take a second to process my confusion. I'd wager a lot of people, even those who may have struggled with the helicopter initially, can agree in hindsight it's not a very challenging fight, and considering everyone faces it with the exact same loadout, it's easy to see that the main deciding factor when it comes to whether you win or not is your approach. It's the realization that good positioning and your environment are your friends, which makes it a decent tutorial fight in my mind. But all too frequently, I'm seeing the main takeaway is, there's only one way to beat this boss, and it's by using your sword. And there are a lot of similar claims being made about Balteus, which are so far off base, it's hard to know where to begin. But they do serve as a great example of where some of the disconnect might be. You see, unlike that review and many comments out there might imply, light mechs can easily body Balteus. In fact, I beat him in about 3 tries, and not because I'm cracked at Armored Core, I'm really not. And not because I used the special anti-Balteus build. I changed one gun after my first attempt, and to be honest, in hindsight, I would have had an easier time using something that matched my playstyle a bit better, like a beam saber. Like I said, the best part of Armored Core is how much it empowers you to play the way you want to play. But sadly, one of its biggest shortcomings is how it struggles to explain that to people. And that's led to 2 problems. On one side of the spectrum, we have players who struggle to beat content without relying on specific builds feeling stifled, because the very nature of Armored Core and its mechanics can make it difficult to figure out whether it's bad parts holding you back or a skill issue. And on the other side, we have players like Donkey, who find a really powerful build early, don't feel a need to change, and can therefore wind up feeling like the game is too easy, maybe even boring as a result.
This thing is unstoppable, and it completely trivialized the game.
The latter coming down to a personal choice, and the former being easy to discuss, but probably infinitely harder to actually address. Largely because on some level, it probably comes down to literacy, and by design, FromSoft doesn't go out of their way to teach everyone everything. Let me ask you something. In your average video game, how often do you see a helicopter and immediately reach for your blade instead of your rocket launcher? Or actually have to properly dodge missiles? Probably not too often, right? Every game works on its own set of logic, so it's no wonder some people struggled while learning AC6s. One of the most highly praised aspects of From's game design is how it doesn't hold your hand. But I think Armored Core is really showing us the potential downside to that approach. Because when everyone is left to their own devices to such an extent, it's easy to learn the wrong things, if you learn anything at all. It's easy to get frustrated and wind up getting in the way of your own fun more often than not. I can absolutely see how after smashing their head against the wall for hours, hours, only to change their build and instantly trivialize an entire encounter. Someone could learn that each boss is a lock, and your job as the player is to find a specific key. And to an extent, that's true. The game can absolutely be approached from that perspective. But in my humble opinion, if you want to get the most bang for your buck, if you want to have the most fun, it's probably more accurate to say that your playstyle is the lock, and while the game provides you with an entire keyring of viable options, it's up to you to decide which actually fits your custom lock, and when the solution for you might be to find a new lock to match the set of keys you have. And that's likely a big part of what makes Armored Core so divisive, because so much of your fun can be so deeply subjective, so deeply rooted in you choosing exactly what you want every fight to look and feel like, and understanding how to get there. But the game is largely disinterested in showing off its potential, let alone showing you how to achieve it, unless you make that choice to seek it out. More so than your standard FromSoft title even. Unlike what you may be used to, some of the best fights, the craziest gear, the hypest moments can't be seen in a single playthrough. They're in New Game Plus Plus. If you look at what the game presents itself as at face value, if you miss the forest for the trees, if you treat it like Dark Souls, you're going to miss out on a hell of an experience. So as has more or less always been the case with FromSoft games, it's kinda up to the community to help teach some of the lessons that Armored Core doesn't, to communicate how much build and gameplay variety there is, how many different ways there are to have fun, and perhaps most importantly, how attainable it all is. And if you're new to Armored Core, it's important to be patient with yourself as well as the game. If you want to get the most out of a mecha title like this, it's important to take your time honing in on what feels fun for you, what doesn't, and why. A great first place to start is downloading a build or two to figure that out. Just be careful, because while doing so, it's very easy to stumble into becoming the other kind of player, the kind that just finds something that works, sticks to it, and never changes. Which isn't inherently bad. By all means, play however you want, but unlike a lot of other games, Armored Core is more about side grades than direct upgrades. In fact, as you progress, the new parts you unlock aren't always objective improvements over what you had before, so much as more specialized options that allow you to refine your builds. So it's easy to feel like you aren't being pushed to mix things up, because in most circumstances you really aren't, and as a result, yeah, the game can absolutely wind up feeling easy and kind of repetitive. And this is where whether or not Armored Core is for you can really come down to the type of player you are. Are you the kind of person who loves tinkering, who will put down a build not because it stopped working, but because you're curious about how much fun you might have with something else? Armored Core is almost definitely for you. But if you need that external pressure to motivate you to change, if every enemy needs to be a threat to make your time feel meaningful, that experience simply won't be there for everyone all the time. Largely because Armored Core isn't Dark Souls, it's a mecha game, and the fact that a lot of fights can be made significantly easier by putting together a broken build isn't a bug, it's a feature. One that some people might be better off avoiding for the sake of their own fun. Just like avoiding the comparisons between the two games might be for the best, because realistically, yeah, there are absolutely through lines like the way right and left hand attacks are mapped to your triggers, likely because Armored Core came first, and just like we're seeing now, FromSoft carries the lessons they learn with them. Is this the best Armored Core game possible for every hardcore fan in the world? Probably not. But I think what I've been getting at throughout this video is, Armored Core can be a wildly subjective experience, making it kinda impossible to give everyone their Armored Core. Not to mention, there are like 16 games in this franchise now, and a lot of variety in terms of the kind of gameplay. 5 doesn't play like 4, and 4 doesn't play like 3, but the Armored Core DNA is always there, just like it is here. And sure, I could grumble a bit about how I wish we were moving about twice as fast as we are right now, or about the severe lack of information on our radar, or about weapon balance. But none of those, or any of my other minor gripes, really impact the fact that Armored Core 6 is a phenomenal AC game. It's a modernization that respects its roots, a really excellent way to introduce people to the franchise, and a perfect springboard for future Armored Core projects. I'm really happy From is making these again, and even happier to see how effectively they've taken everything they've learned over the past decade and incorporated aspects in meaningful ways that enhance the overall experience, while maintaining Armored Core's identity. It's an incredible game. There's almost nothing quite like it out there, and I can't recommend it enough, as long as you remember, it's not Dark Souls, and that's not just okay, it's a beautiful thing. In fact, I'd argue that's why it's fun. And if you had fun watching this video, maybe leave a like, and think about sticking around with a sub. I love game design, and thinking about the nuances of why we love the games we do is the kind of thing that keeps me up at night. So expect more discussions like this from me in the future, because that's what I'm here to do. Share some of the reasons I think gaming is one of the most powerful artistic mediums on the planet. So if that sounds up your alley, subscribe, and let's talk about why it's fun. Not gonna lie, it's honestly just kind of funny how many people are out here proudly exposing themselves, acting like weirdos who've only ever had straight cheese or pepperoni on their pizza, just now finding out Supreme is a thing, and writing that off as not being pizza because, oh no, it has a stagger bar.